Did you know in the 2016 presidential election only 61% of voting age individuals reported voting? Look where we are now, living with the first president up for impeachment since 1998. Today, we will be discussing the absolute importance of voting, the positive effects of voting, and the negative effects of choosing not to. Much of the information I'm going to share with you today comes from HuffPost.com, nonprofit.org, and the VoxNewsArticle.com. Firstly, making the choice to vote and putting your opinion on paper for the election is extremely important. It is a right that we as Americans have, and to neglect that right is to not take advantage of the freedom that we have. According to an article on the HuffPost.com, countries lacking a democratic political institution are denied the right to vote and have their voices heard, and they don't even have the option to shape their government and their future. Not every citizen can get out there and vote, but the ones who do have a say in their government and their possible futures. Another reason it is so crucial that young people vote is because young voters account for half of the voting population. Imagine the impact you could do if your opinion meant half of the decision. Yet another reason, and perhaps the most convincing reason to vote, is American youth is the population affected the most by voting, and the generation that will be continued to affected the most. Which brings me to my last point. Our children, if we choose to have any, will be affected by our decisions just as much as we are. Secondly, we will be discussing some of the positive effects of choosing to vote. One positive effect that can come out of young people taking advantage of their right to vote would be a better chance of electing a candidate that can make some real worthy changes. A lot of people that choose not to vote still may have their opinions on which candidate is going to be the best option for their future, but staying silent does nothing for their cause. Another effect can be the gain of control us millennials crave so much. As of right now, we're in the grip of the baby boomers generation and the choices they made while voting in their elections. It led to the society that we live in now. According to nonprofit.org, even if the winner of an election was not their preferred choice, people are happier with the outcome and they feel more in control of their lives if they voted. Yet another reason to go out and vote is the upcoming possibility of new voting opportunities. When the government sees a rise in young voters, it is a gateway for the government to examine options such as eradicating the voting age and possibly allowing felons to vote also. Finally, possibly one of the greatest effects of voting now is setting an example for the potential children of this youth generation. According to Vox.com, the best predictor of whether you'll do it in the future is whether you have a pattern of doing it. To do it and to make it a habit is helping influence those around you and those you potentially raise as children. Lastly, we will discuss the negative effects of choosing not to vote. A lot of negatives comes from choosing to neglect your freedom to vote, one being leaving your futures in the hands of somebody else. Not speaking for yourself allows for unspoken opinions to be diminished by different options than yours. Another reason is the influence that follows your decision. While choosing to vote is a great influence, it could be the same way around. Yet another effect of not voting is the negative effect on the economy, depending on who is elected. For example, Donald Trump, according to TheGuardian.com, Trump has effectively torn up decades of trade agreements and antagonized the largest trading partners. The impact of his rancor he has sown is still being assessed, but it has already triggered dramatic sell-offs on stock markets and may have contributed to a slowdown in the Chinese economy. Finally, the last effect of choosing not to vote as youth is the restrictions that are to come if less and less people decide to stay in and not vote. Politicians are noticing the lack in voters and taking advantage by creating new voter laws that make it more and more difficult for the youth to vote, such as the new voter ID law, requiring a valid ID or driver's license to be able to cast a ballot. If there continues to be little representation of the youth at the polls, politicians will continue to keep it that way by creating such laws. So, in conclusion, it is of utmost importance to cast your vote because it is our right as Americans to do so. Some positive effects of voting include the control and influence in doing so. The negative effects consist of economic tragedies and further voting restrictions. But finally, choosing the side to vote, especially at a young age, will never be a bad choice. Only good for your party can come from it. So, the only question I have to ask you, will I see you at the polls this November?